Okay, my name is Jeff Bakes. I'm the reward leader for PwC based in Central Eastern Europe. My responsibility is for performance across the whole of the business, across 32 countries. That's effectively just over 10,000 people, and those 32 countries within PwC represent literally a third of our global revenue. The issue I want to talk about today is, I suppose, under the banner of transformation. When I first arrived in the organisation, our big issue at the time was regarding the reward strategy, or lack of reward strategy. If you could imagine, we're an international company, we have 32 countries out there. Each of these 32 countries had different pay structures, different philosophies, different bonus plans, and a whole complex sort of different legislation across the sort of countries that they operated in. And what was pretty clear to me that it wasn't a question of fixing what I called the reward strategy. It's a question of, well, let's integrating the reward strategy with the business, and it became clear at the time that the business as such, the way that we do business in our particular operation is engaging with clients. And one of our big themes is regarding what we call the PwC experience, which is engaging with clients in a sort of different way, so that we can win their trust, win their integrity, look to develop further business with them. And so it wasn't just a question of saying, well, let's look at reward and everything else will sort it out. It was a question of saying, well, how do we actually mix in and match reward into the overall business strategy? How do we actually transform what we call a lot of our behaviours as an organisation, because we obviously focus on the bottom line and generating revenue. But obviously in professional services, it's not just about the bottom line, it's about how you engage with clients. And so the opportunity quickly became apparent that we could use the reward strategy initiative as a way of transforming and changing our behaviours as well. Now the starting point of this work was essentially to look at what we had. And clearly with 32 countries doing different things, we had a common grade structure in a lot of our frontline operations, but in our sort of corporate office operations, we had sort of dysfunctional groups, we had sort of gradings which didn't make sense, hadn't really been looked at for a number of years. So it was a question of sort of sitting down and sort of trying to understand the marketplace, what markets are we in, who are our competitors, and within professional services, and that's not just the big four. We recruit people from across a whole range of industries. And so we had to look, more laterally at saying, well, what is happening in the marketplaces? Now, the interesting thing regarding Central Eastern Europe is that over the last 3 or 4 years, certain countries, and particularly Poland, for example, have been very much positive GDP. So it's been very much a growth market, a market across Europe which has very much been stagnant. So there's a lot of attraction taking place, a lot of turnover of staff, people are very mobile. And so we're actually trying to recruit into a very sort of complex and dynamic marketplace. So the starting point was really to look at the reward structure, understand where we were, understand what needed to happen, and that meant working myself through our senior management team and through our executive board, and really getting their attention, because a third of our overall costs are our people. And that has a huge impact on the revenue and the bottom line, because everything that I'm doing in terms of what I call reward is I'm actually spending the revenue that the company is generating. So I've got to be pretty clear and transparent in terms of what I'm spending, in terms of how we go forward. That meant really sitting down with the executive teams, with our country managing partners, with our business leaders across our various lines of service, and really getting to the bottom line, which was about, how do we actually motivate, how do we attract, how do we retain people? And it's not just about the money, because it's one thing to get a reward strategy aligned to the marketplace, but it's how do we actually engage with our people? And engagement, effectively, is not about emails, communications, electronic mail. It's engaging people in a very different dynamic environment. And a lot of that is what I call one-on-one. The conversations between the individual and their immediate manager are absolutely critical. Looking at reward, we became pretty clear to me particularly that in fact what we were doing, we were rewarding what I call performance twice. We had a bonus scheme and we had a pay structure. What we weren't really focusing in on is how people develop. Though we had development plans, they were very much an afterthought, because people were more concerned about, well, how am I getting paid this year? Am I getting a bonus? You know, am I getting a pay increase? And what we were losing out was that sort of behavioural change, which was around about competencies. Not just technical competencies, but behavioural competencies. And we had a large battery of competencies for each of our particular roles. And what we were failing to do was really to challenge people in terms of, well, are you delivering your competencies? You know, we have certain behavioural standards, are we doing that? Or are we just focusing on performance as a sort of consequence of trying to drive the business forward, but at the same time ignoring, you know, what people can bring for free in terms of their discretionary effort? So the challenge was building a pay structure initially which focused on performance, and to do that, that meant performance had to be dealt with in terms of a transparent bonus plan, which was basically a generic plan, transparent in terms of it was open, in terms of the targets were known, in terms of the firm targets, the lines of service targets were transparent, and individuals had clear objectives. And when I'm talking about objectives, I'm not talking about here a wish list of 10 to 20. I'm talking of what I call critical, 4 to 5 critical objectives for them in terms of how they do, in terms of their performance. What is to be measured, how they're to be measured. So the emphasis was on transparency, but moving performance into bonus. In respect of the pay structures themselves, that meant looking at the market and realigning to the market, but at the same time looking at our competency model. And what we came forward with was a sort of approach whereby we created what I call a single pay range for a particular grade, but within that grade we're creating what I call 3 areas to reflect how people were developing in terms of their competencies. And so we had or developed the concept of when a person joins a new or undertakes a new role or a new grade, that would be developing. They then, after a period of time, move into become established, and then finally they become experienced. And therefore we would pay differently according to where they were within the grade, based on their competencies, in terms of whether the competencies were geared to developing or competencies were geared to the experience factor. So that people would progress through pay, no longer through performance, but would progress through the pay ranges based on their acquisition and demonstration of competency. And that basically changed the one-on-one conversations between individuals, because a lot of people can sit quite happily in a particular role and doing a particular project for a year or 2 or 3 years, but not actually stretching their competencies. So therefore the onus was on individuals to say, look, I want to learn, I want to develop, I want to challenge myself. And equally the firm were then turning around to individuals and saying, well, I want to challenge you to do more, I want you to do it in a different way, I want you to learn different skill sets. Effectively, the reward strategy basically enabled us as an organisation to sort of take on board 2 main challenges. One was looking at pay in a more holistic approach, understanding where we were in the market and creating transparency both in the construction, how we benchmark against our competitors and general industry, creating bonus plans which were again transparent with a lot of clarity, a lot of communication about how we were doing as an organisation, but at the same time, by building in the competency approach, we enabled that one-on-one conversation that was happening to engage at a different level, because the behavioural change for us is the biggest challenge. It's not about people are technically very, very able, but what really drives a business in any business forward is the individuals themselves, the way they engage with people, the way they motivate and work as teams, the way they win business, the way they can solve problems. And that's very much a team approach and a behavioural approach. We launched this initiative in circa sort of 2009 through 2010, and then as most organisations we obviously look at our sort of internal people surveyed in terms of asking critical questions of how we're doing as an organisation, what's going well, what's not going well. And what was significant within the fact of 12 months, we'd actually turned around the whole what I call internal perception of reward and behaviours. We went from a sort of an achievement of, say, 33% people were satisfied, they knew how they were paid, they believed that they were paid fairly. to within 12 months that had gone to approximately 65%, which was a massive increase in satisfaction in terms of, in terms of how we reward people, that they believe they're fairly paid. But equally, that brought a huge transformation in the way that we engage with our people, that we were, having one-on-one conversations which were ongoing. There wasn't the annual cycle of every 6 months, yes, we have a formal sit down, understand individually where people are going. Yes, we still had those processes, but what we actually encouraged was a one-on-one conversation, which was ongoing throughout the course of the sort of, the ongoing year. What we're now as an organisation, looking at is, well, how do we take that model which we developed in one part of our business or a third of our business, how do we leverage that across our sort of global network? If we're thinking about this as a global platform for 120,000 employees, what is the best means of actually communicating with those individuals? And it's quite apparent, that the technology shifts over the last year or 2 or 3 years, particularly into social media, has transformed what I call cultural precepts and cultural norms. We have perceptions that people come from different cultures and different backgrounds. The reality is that things are rapidly changing. Technology almost mitigates those ethnic and cultural backgrounds, so that we're dealing with, particularly with our sort of young population, our average age is 27, they've come from different places at different times, and technology to them is a second nature. So we're now looking at sort of what I call cloud type processes and systems, whereby ownership of your space in terms of your information about you as an individual, in terms of your performance, your competencies, your aspirations, your desires, your successes, etc., is held effectively in one place, right? And you as an individual access that information, populate that information, open that up to your friends and colleagues, like using various different social medias. People now communicate what I call in short, intensive bursts. In what I call the old days, that people would write, large emails, big spreadsheets, and PowerPoint presentations. I keep saying to my colleagues that, as far as I can see at the moment, the email is virtually dead. I communicate, particularly with my children, particularly on sort of like social media, high intensity text information, messaging services, etc. And that's how our people communicate, our young population communicate in an entirely different way. Now that forces us as more senior executives to sort of think about, well, how do we communicate our messages? So we've had to sort of actively now look at re-engineering how we communicate using different medias and different formats. Because as an organisation, we may have average age of 27, but we have a population which is fairly demographically spread. So our more senior folks are interested in saying, well, I need that in a spreadsheet, I need to understand data, or I need to understand a PowerPoint. But we have to, particularly in HR, get really what I call communication savvy about how we engage with our people. It's not about email, it's not about endless briefings. It's more about what I call face-to-face, one-on-one engagement, using technology in a different format to engage and motivate our people. And that forces us not only to engage in a different way, but forces us to sort of challenge existing processes and policies. So the upshot of all this was what started as what I call relatively straightforward reward initiative, we've got a problem, we need to fix it, has sort of morphed over a period of time into one which really it picked up behavioural change in the organisation, and then led us to sort of look down at the technology platform that we use as an organisation, how we engage, and equally looking at the messaging in how people react to different types of messaging. So this is sort of a rapidly evolving event, and it really forces us to understand that change is constant. There isn't a process whereby we've ended the process, we start another process. We now embarked on a whole series of what I call rolling initiatives to engage with our people in a way that they understand, but at the same time constantly checking that we're engaging at the right levels, that they understand what we're trying to do, we're mutually, we're aligned, and at the same time we're consistent in the messaging we're giving to working with our clients across the globe. In summary, it's an interesting challenge. started from a technical point of view in terms of fix a problem. It's expanded into what I call behavioural and transformational change, and then led us now to a position where we've had to fundamentally rethink the way that we engage and communicate with our people. And the realisation is that this is no longer sort of a segment of end of project 1, project 2, project 3. It's very much an ongoing journey of exploring how we communicate and how we deal with issues in the organisation, which forces us to sort of constantly keep rethinking, are these policies right? Are these processes right? Do they actually engage with our people? They might engage with more senior people because they're used to doing things a different style, but we have to really go back to basics in terms of the one-on-one communication. How am I doing? How are we doing? How can we make things better? You know, how can we get that discretionary effort, that extra discretionary effort for free, which makes a huge difference in business today.